The England of Queen Elizabeth was a land divided within itself. In Westminster, Elizabeth presided over a court and parliament that was committed to modernising policies of Protestant religious reform and centralised government. But in the north, the old faith continued, and so did the old feudal social order. The Wars of the Roses, a century before, had been born out of the squabbles of mighty lords, and no one wanted to see that again, which gave the Tudors all the excuse they needed to undermine the power of the ancient fiefdoms and put it into the hands of their own men. But in the inly working north, as southern politicians were wont to call it, power was still in the hands of the twin earldoms of Northumberland and Westmoreland, represented by the ancient families of Percy and Neville. And here, in his stronghold at Brancepeth, Sir Charles Neville, the dashing young Earl of Westmoreland, was master of all he surveyed. Northern England and its two earls may have been Catholic, but 4 miles from Brancepeth in Durham, the new bishop was anything but. Bishop Pilkington was a southerner and England's only Puritan prelate, and he had come to bend the northern Catholics to his will. Altars were ripped from the churches and replaced with communion tables. Now he made it his object to reform the Durham clergy and replace all Catholics. His new dean, Dean Whittington, ordered the gravestones of the reverend priors to be taken up and used to pave the washhouse floor, and the stone coffins were used as horse troughs. And the dean's wife was worse. Having no use for the ancient banner of St. Cuthbert, which had led the men of Durham to victory against the Scots at Neville's Cross and at Flodden, she burnt it. The cult of St. Cuthbert was the source of northern pride, and he was patron saint of the cathedral. But not content with the destruction of his banner, the dean had his statue defaced and broken all in pieces. Bishop Pilkington boasted, "Our poor papists weep to see our churches stripped so bare." Into this divided world of Catholic and Protestant, north and south, there came another queen. Mary, Queen of Scots, was the northern Catholic answer to the southern Protestant Elizabeth. What is more, she had a claim to Elizabeth's throne, and Elizabeth had no heir. Mary spelt danger. But if she could be married to a Protestant nobleman, an Englishman, then her threat as a focus for Catholic rebellion would be nullified. The Duke of Norfolk, Westmoreland's brother-in-law, was just such a man, and the most powerful noble in England, a fitting match for a queen. The nobles wanted him to marry her. But one man, William Cecil, leader of the Queen's Council, was opposed. The nobles decided to oust him, but at the crucial moment, Elizabeth walked in saying, "I shall pardon him that and more." It had taken the reins of 5 Tudor monarchs. But if you're looking for the moment when England turns from a medieval feudal kingdom into a centralised bureaucracy, when England turns from a traditional Catholic country into a Protestant, and when North becomes subject to South, then this is it. It's also the moment when Elizabeth truly becomes Queen of England. Norfolk's planned marriage had overnight become a noose around his neck. Support for the marriage fell away as the political landscape shifted through the power of a determined queen. Norfolk left court and wrote to the northern earls begging them not to rebel. He intended to lie low and let it all blow over. But Elizabeth took his withdrawal from court as the first move of a rebel. Up in Brancepeth, no one knew the world had changed. When the Duke left court, it was rumoured through the north that the Lords of Privy Council were wonderfully divided, and so was it thought all the realm would be in hurly-burly about the same. The northern earls were immediately under suspicion. Both were known Catholics, and Westmoreland, after all, was married to the Duke's sister. but they protested their innocence at York to the Earl of Sussex, the Queen's chief minister in the north.
A little later, in early October, they were asked again to go to York. This time Westmoreland sent a very different answer. I am not ignorant what false rumour the Bishop of Durham and some others have made of me in this country. Whereupon, as I am credibly informed, the Queen's Majesty hath conceived displeasure against me. Which things considered, I dare not venture myself to come to you, where I know my enemies to be, unless I should come with such a company as I fear would be misliked of, and therefore I have thought it more meet to stay at home.
Northumberland also refused the summons to York. Sussex wrote to the Queen that they intend not to stir present rebellion, but rather for fear to withdraw for their defence, adding, there will be no actual rebellion. On the 10th of November, Northumberland came here to Westmoreland's castle at Brancepeth with his wife and retinue. He later recalled,
We sat down and advised what was to be done. Some was in earnest opinion to proceed in the cause, and some others were of contrary opinion, and so we brake and departed, every man to provide for himself. My Lady Westmoreland, hearing that conclusion, cried out weeping bitterly, and said we and our country were shamed for ever, that now in the end we should seek holes to creep into. The would-be rebels were still wavering when word reached Brancepeth from the Queen, ordering them to come to her upon the duty of your allegiance forthwith, without any delay or excuse.
Fear now led to action. The Earls were afraid they had gone too far already, and to submit to the Queen now would be their death. There was only one other option. That night, one of the servants roused Northumberland with a false rumour. His enemies would be on him within the hour to drag him before the Queen. He sprang up and sent men to break the bridges, and the bells of Brancepeth rang their peal backwards into the night. That sound was taken up by churches all across the county. It was the time-honoured call to rebellion. The two Earls raised their standards and rode into Durham at the head of 400 armed men. When they reached the city, they made their way straight to the cathedral, the focus of local anger. Here it became clear that Bishop Pilkington's reforms hadn't been so successful after all. A line of priests led the procession into the cathedral under a banner of the Holy Cross and the 5 wounds of Christ. After them came the two Earls and their ladies, followed by the horsemen in their armour, and then the footmen, bowmen, billmen and spearmen. Inside, for the first time in a decade, they celebrated Mass. Catholicism had come back to Durham.
People flocked to Durham as penitents, to be welcomed back into the fold of the true religion. They swelled the ranks of the rebel army, who now sewed red crosses to their shoulders, the badge of the English Crusader.
Many rebels wanted to restore Catholicism. Some of them wanted to free the Scottish Queen. But all of them were united in their bond to their lords the Earls, the old feudal bond. As one contemporary songwriter saw it, we'll keep our bond to our noble lords, we'll tine our faith, we'll break our faith to the Southern Queen.
When they did go south, they headed for the castle at Tutbury, where Mary Queen of Scots was a prisoner. With her release, their political strength would be immense. Norfolk's marriage could go ahead, and they could succeed in their avowed aim to bring back the old faith.
The Earls decided to carry on the fight on their home turf, and retreated northwards till they reached the Queen's stronghold of Barnard Castle, and laid siege to it. Inside, the loyalist Sir George Bowes had a command of 700 or 800 men. Outside, the rebels numbered some 1,000 horse and 6,000 foot. The outer walls quickly fell to the Earl's men, but the inner stronghold was harder work. The soldiers inside had no will to fight. In their hearts they supported the rebels' cause, and they'd rather be outside as rebels than inside fighting for the Queen. They showed their allegiance in dramatic style. One day, 80 men leapt from the castle walls to join the rebel cause. Some 35 of them suffered broken legs, arms, even broken necks. But the desertions continued. That night, 150 castle guards joined the rebel cause. After 2 weeks of siege, Sir George Bowes was forced to abandon the castle to the rebels. In a chivalrous gesture, the Earls allowed him to march out with the 400 men who had stayed loyal to join the army gathering against them in the south.
Days later, in the face of a massive southern army, the rebel earls at Durham gave warning to the common people to make shift for themselves, and thereupon departed with a great number of horsemen westwards. They rode to the debatable lands of the Scottish border, and from there into Scotland itself. Retribution was inevitable. In the roundup that followed the rebellion, it was said that there were scarcely enough loyal men to try the guilty. William Cecil instructed Sir George Bowes, the veteran of Barnard Castle, that not one village was to be without a hanging for its part in the rebellion, adding that the victims were to be of the meaner sort, since the Queen would benefit from the hefty fines imposed on the rich.
The official figure for those to be hanged was given vaguely as 700 and odd. 74 were hanged here in the marketplace at Durham. The law said that a traitor's corpse should be left hanging till it rotted and fell. But in a small act of mercy, the Crown did not prosecute the women who, under cover of night, cut down their menfolk in order to bury them. Northumberland too was executed. He was betrayed to the English by his Scottish hosts and was beheaded in York. But Charles Neville, the Earl of Westmoreland, escaped to Flanders, where he received a small pension from the King of Spain. But his lands were stripped and seized by the Crown. For the North, it was the end of local rule. From now on, this region would be ruled by a southern government, with no real interest in the North. Sir Charles Neville would never see his wife and daughters again. His castle at Branspeth fell into rack and ruin. Even the church didn't escape the vengeance of the Crown. William Cecil decreed that, wherever any bells were rung to raise the rebellion, only one bell is to be left in the steeple, in memory thereof.